Hello, a very warm welcome back to you. We are thinking about John chapter 6. We've had a number of studies now, thinking firstly about the feeding of the 5,000 with which the story opens in John 6, the chapter opens in John 6 rather, and then we move from there to the last 2 weeks where we've been thinking about this business of Jesus and the walking on the water. So now as we move to that, we're going to see this kind of interconnectedness of the story. We're in John chapter 6 then, and let's have a look please if we can. Verse 20 have here is Jesus' responses to this group of very outward people is to say, look, the reason why you're following me is not because you've seen the signs and that you've interpreted those signs spiritually, but that you've eaten of my provision, the fruit of those signs, and you're following me because you are doing so in a fleshly way. It's simply that you're an outward people following outward results and material results, and I get it, I did get that. But listen, Jesus says to them, I know that that's all you can see through your through the eyes of the self, but I want to encourage you towards something. Jesus says, don't labour, don't work for food that perishes, but for food which endures to eternal life. You see, don't think that the key to this miracle, what we saw back on the mountain, Jesus saying, don't think that the key to that was that I was able to turn a few loaves of bread and a few fish into a provision for the multitudes. You're missing the point. That wasn't it. Don't labour for those things. Don't work yourself into the ground for food that perishes, but for food that endures to eternal life. So Jesus is making a distinction then between physical food and, to boot, physical provision, and spiritual food and spiritual provision and spiritual nourishment and spiritual sustainment, of course. But he says, now look, this food that endures to eternal life, which the Father will give you, doesn't say the Father might give you, it says the Father will give you, for on him the Father has set his seal. Now, a few things to say about this. Number one is that men are nailed to the things of this life. They're absolutely nailed to it. We have the story in 2 Timothy chapter 2, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 10, where Paul is reflecting on his ministry and he calls out, he says, look, come to me quickly. He said, everybody's gone. For Demas, chapter 4, verse 10, for Demas is so in love with this world, he's gone away. Cretans, exactly the same thing. And there is a sense in which what Paul is singing is what Jesus is speaking about, which is to say, look, if you want to really understand the dynamic of the Spirit, if you want to really understand what provision is, then the key is this. Don't labour, don't work hard for things that perish, but actually seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added unto you. All of them, not some of them, all of these things will be added unto you. Don't seek the kingdom in order that you can get perishable things, and don't seek perishable things at the expense of the kingdom, but seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added unto you. But you see, in order for that to happen, that kind of Demasness has to be washed out of us. Paul says in his own words in Galatians, he says, look, I am crucified to this world, and this world is crucified to me. We have nothing in each other, really we don't. But unfortunately, we're being encouraged by the secular age in which we live in to pursue it's this relentless pursuit of stuff, and we never have enough stuff. I just finished reading a fascinating article in the Sunday Times by an interview about Simon Cowell, and there's this endless sense of acquisitiveness, and one of the questions he was asked was about the whole idea of buying the franchise out and having this sort of Disney thing with Philip Green, the British Home Stores boss, and Cal says, well, I'd much rather be a billionaire than a millionaire. I mean, okay, I get it, but how much stuff can you have? Because you see, the thing that we've got to understand, particularly if we're going to pursue the acquisition of stuff, the whole point is, I want to get all that I can get, not in order that I. It's not in order that I can. It's not in order what it gets me to get. It gives me the ability to get. It's what it gives you the ability to give. So if you're going to be acquisitive, do it for that reason. But the truth is that we've got to learn to start using things and loving people instead of. The truth is that men are nailed to the things of this life. Look at Demas, 2 Timothy chapter 4. Paul says of Demas, Demas, he is so in love with this world that he's gone. Cretans, exactly the same thing. And the truth of the matter is that there is a sense in which we've got to learn, if we can, the real spiritual value. There's nothing wrong with stuff. But the point is that we've got to recognise that as believers we are to use things and love people. Unfortunately, we're coming increasingly to be an environment that loves things and uses people, and that's not the way of the Spirit. You can have all the stuff that you want, but the secret is to seek first the kingdom of heaven, and then all of these things will be added unto you. Not some of them, all of these things will be added unto you. But seek ye first the kingdom. Don't seek the kingdom in order that these things can be added to you. Don't seek things that perish at the expense of the kingdom. No, seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all of those things will be added unto you. But there is a sense in which you have to recognise that we've got to move away from this business of opposites that we talked about last week. That this business of good and evil, we've got to move away from that and move into this new realm, this realm of life. So let's look carefully at what Jesus is wanting to say here. Don't work for food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life. Now there is a very, very important choice that each and every one of us are confronted with. You either choose to make a living or make a life. Now one thing I promise you is if you make a life, you'll make a living. But if all you ever try and do is make a living, I've got no guarantee that you'll ever have a life. That's the truth of the matter is. That really is the truth of the matter. So here Jesus is giving some very, very specific instructions. Don't work for food that perishes. In the book of Isaiah, we have a lovely allusion to this. In Isaiah chapter 55, it says, look, come, he said, come, all of you are thirsty, come to the waters, and all of you have no money, come and drink. Come and buy milk and honey. Buy it without money. Buy it without cost. Just come. There's a freedom there. Why spend money, Isaiah says? Why spend money on what is not bread? Why are you labouring on what doesn't satisfy you, Isaiah says? Listen to me. Listen to me. Eat what is good and delight your soul. Delight your soul with the richest of fare. And there's a sort of sense in which the gospel moves us away from this acquisitiveness that is so much the spirit of our age. Don't work for food that perishes, but for food that endures to eternal life. Very important. The difference, as I say, between making a living and making a life. But this food that endures to eternal life is the food of the kingdom. Now, do you have to choose one or another? No, you don't have to choose one or another, but you get nailed to the thing that you choose. That's the point. You get nailed to it. So the response of the crowd is to say, okay, well, what shall we do that we may do the works of God? Now, this is important. What must we do then? Here's Jesus' response. Believe. Believe in him whom he has sent. So many times we've come to this verse down the years, and people have asked us a question about, what is it then? What does it mean to live the life of to live the Christian life? You say we're not under the law. Well, what works must we do? And Jesus is very, very clear on this. Here's the work: believe. Here's the work: believe. This is the work of God. Believe in him who sent him. And so they said, well, because it's just an unsatisfactory answer, do you see? So they said, well, look, What sign do you give us to validate this? It's all very well sort of breezing in here and saying, this is the work that you believe, but what sign do you give us in order that we might understand this? And Jesus says, oh, right, okay, so where are we going with this? They say, well, look, quite simply, our fathers, what they did was they gave us manna in the wilderness. You've got to understand something. This is what happened with Moses when we were in the wilderness and we had a sign. We knew we were given manna. Our fathers, what they did was they gave us bread out of heaven to eat. Can you imagine that, Jesus? What do you make of that? I admit your party trick was spectacular on the mountain, and we're impressed. You've piqued our interest. We're right here. We're here. We've come to see through, to see if we can see something in it. But let me tell you something. We were given manna from heaven by our fathers. Jesus says, oh, I see. Well, truly, 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 I say to you, it wasn't Moses in the first place that gave you bread out of heaven, but it was my Father that gives you the true bread out of heaven. And I want you to see this, Jesus is saying, for the bread of God, Jesus says, is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. Then they said to him, well, Lord, give us this bread then. Does that not sound to you a little bit like the woman at the well? This water that will well up in you. And she said, well, give me this water. And Jesus says, well, they say, well, give us this bread then. You're telling us there's this water that we can drink, that if we drink it, we'll never thirst. And now you're telling us there's this bread that we can eat, and if we eat it, we'll never hunger. Well, we want this bread. We want this bread. Well, in the following weeks, we will see how this begins to play out. But let's leave it there for the moment. The people are now really drawn, and they're saying, okay, well, this is what we want. That's what our Father gave us, and you're saying you can best that. Well, this we got to hear. Lord, then give us this bread. If you've got bread, you've got bread that will sustain us for life. Well, where is it? Now they're piqued. Their interest is piqued. Now, understand something, that the giving of the manna by Moses was considered to be the supreme act of his ministry. That was the threshold moment in his ministry. So they were essentially saying, if you're the Messiah, then can you trump that? And Jesus is going to say to him, listen, let me explain something to you. First off, it wasn't Moses who gave you bread from heaven, it was my Father. That's the first thing for you to know. But the second thing for you to know is this, is that what you got from Moses, you got bread from God. What you'll get with me is I'm the bread of God. You've had bread for your life, but I am the bread of life. And the difference is so significant. You see, here we are now at this key moment. I'm the bread of life. I'm the one who comes out of heaven. Don't you understand that all that you saw, your forefathers saw in the wilderness, was just something that pointed towards me? What you saw on the mountain was just us fast forwarding the tape to saying that's what they saw on the mountain. But what they saw on the mountain was not the provision that came down from heaven. It was me, the one who was coming down from heaven. I'm it. I'm the one. You think I'm the goose that lays the golden egg. There's no denying that. But the point is, this is the point. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me won't hunger and won't thirst. Whoever believes in me will not hunger and will not thirst. And I put it to you, Jesus essentially says. Now this is where we will find ourselves into a real dilemma now. They couldn't disbelieve in him, but they couldn't believe in him. And so from this moment, from this watershed moment, we see this shift, we see this slide almost away from Jesus. And we see this chasm appear, because Jesus is going to stop being so outward and he's going to move very inward, which we'll pick up next time. But in the meantime, I wish you every blessing and look forward to being with you again on our next show.